All right, the 100-day challenge is done, right? RP2SA. Did everybody forget what that was? I finally figured out, how to say it. Neville kind of helped me out with that encouragement. But it's read, pray, 2 hours of service, and then you have a self-action, and then you attend services. So that's the acronym. And now that it's over, I was trying to figure out what I could do to stay engaged in that whole philosophy and not really just, hit the 100-day challenge. What could I do? So I looked at it as a lifestyle change, and something that my wife and I have just started doing is we signed up for a Bible study. And this is probably going to be a infomercial, if you will, on, what we're doing. But essentially, it's a class that we go to. It's through the Louisville Bible College, and essentially it's a writer. His name's James E. Smith, and he says the New Testament book made simple. And he gives an acronym, of course, and some other ideas and thoughts of how to make the Bible simple to read, at least the New Testament. Well, I take that back. He's got an Old Testament made simple too. So we've made a decision to spend our $13 just on the book, just to get an understanding of what it is. Now, the first thing that I gleaned out of his writing was, he says, let me see if I got it here. Okay. Well, let's talk about his acronym first. Speak is what it is. And it comes from the Old Testament verse, 1 Samuel 3:10. And at the end of the verse, it says, speak, for your servant hears. And with that, he basically takes this word speak and breaks it into an acronym of situation, plan, eternal purpose, acclaim, and then key. And for the situation, it's just a condition or a position of circumstances of a certain period of time for that particular writer. The plan is how the book is structured. The eternal purpose is what the writer is trying to show, for eternity. And then acclaim is a praise for Jesus. And then key is like key words, key phrases, I guess things that are pretty important. There's also the word hear in that, and what he basically points out is important things that you want to look at. So say you don't have time to read the entire book of whatever, just call Matthew, whoever, Mark, Luke, John, whatever you want to pick, any of the New Testament books. And he says he's got a list of things that he thinks that are outstanding or very important that you should pick up on. But the first thing that he writes in his book is he says that the study guide is not really the real thing to use. It's more of a guide. If you really want to understand the Bible, you need to stay in the Word. So I thought that was very important. So it kind of gives me a good idea of what his thoughts are, what his mentality is. And to me, it seems like with this book, I'm learning a lot, quickly. Learned the percentages of the New Testament. So for the book that I'm just going to talk about, I'll just go through one example. Matthew, that's approximately 13.1% of the New Testament writing. He only wrote one book, but he captured 13% of the writing in there. And from that, you can see that, that's really interesting how one book could have that much of an impact. But then you've got Luke and Acts, that's 27, almost 28% of the New Testament writing. So it gives you some different thoughts and ideas and how you go about your study. That's really what this is about, is for us to study and try to get better. And for me, I'm not a reader. I don't like to read too much, but with a simple assisted book, I guess, if you will, it will allow me to get more out of it. So I'm just going to briefly go through the book of Matthew. So the author he basically starts out with Matthew being a synoptic gospel. I don't know if you all know what that means, but it essentially means a common or similar view, and it's tied directly with Mark and Luke. So John is not in that synoptic gospel, but those first three books I mentioned, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, have a similar or core meaning, but you may already have known that. But in this study or in this book, he breaks it down. First of all, he goes through and talks about the author, about Matthew, and He's the son of Alphaeus. He has a brother, James. I've already talked about the percentage. He was a tax collector before he became an apostle. But he was very detailed because he was pretty much, most of his writings were an eyewitness account of the life of Jesus. And I didn't know that. I mean, you don't know. I mean, I didn't know that, but maybe some of you all did. Anyway, so if you look at the situation, he says it was written in AD 50. Most of those who made up the early Christian church were of Jewish background. And his gospel was written more as like a teaching or evangelistic tool. So if you want to share the message with someone through the gospel, it seems like Matthew is the one to choose from what I'm seeing. And also because of the Jews and how they loved the law or respected the law of Moses, he also pointed out that Jesus made a lot of positive statements about the laws of Moses at that time. And the Jews also believed that the Messiah came from the line of David, so he pretty much gave you the lineage, I guess, of Jesus to the line of David. So that was the first part of it. That's the S, the situation. The plan is the structure, and there's 4 different structures that he's got in here. The structure, the geographical plan, the chronological, and the biblical. So in the structure, he basically breaks it down into 7 sections. It's the beginning of Jesus, or the birth of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, the selection of the 12 apostles, the Sermon by the Sea, guidelines for the kingdom of citizens, and it gives the referring chapters as well, the warning of the end of the age, and then the Great Commission in chapter 28. So after he goes through all that, then he breaks down the geographical piece. So from chapter 1 to 4, 11, it was Galilee and Judea is where he was, and then chapter 4 to 18, Galilee. Chapter 19 to 25 was Judea, and then 26 to the end was back to Judea and Galilee. So it's really a high-level type overview, but it helps you at least get a good structure of how the book is broken down. And of course, the chronological is from his birth to the final commission. The biographical it basically shows he was a carpenter to a preacher to the Messiah. Of course, the external purpose of this is the account of the life of Christ and demonstration that Jesus is the Messiah that was promised in the Old Testament. Some of the keys were from what he wrote down was chapter 12, how the religious leaders rejected Jesus. One of the key verses was Matthew 3:2, repent for the kingdom of heaven is near. And then a key phrase, obviously, the kingdom of heaven was used 33 times in the book of Matthew. And there were some significant words. Blessed was used 18 times, king was used 20 times. Now, I have to go back and truly look at, all these accounts to make sure that what's written in the study guide is accurate. But I mean, it seems pretty realistic that that word was used so many times and that verse was used so many times. But you can make your own conclusion, obviously. He also points out some interesting facts, too, in the here section, of course. He talks about some outstanding chapters would be the parables in Matthew 13, Peter's great confession in Matthew 16, the Sermon on the Mount, of course, in Matthew 5 and 7, Jesus' birth and the visit of the Magi in the first chapter. But the things that I thought were interesting is he's got some favorite lines from the first gospel. The golden rule, do unto others what you would have them do to you. Also, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth, in the Beatitudes. So a lot of things that if you just tried to read through it, like me, I would be reading and I would just go to a different direction. So this kind of gives me an opportunity to focus on key things and to look for those things prior to getting into the Word. So I'm not, a salesman of anything to promote this book, but I'm telling you what, for me, it's a very simple process to use and to help you in understanding the Bible. And it's not just Matthew, it's all the New Testament books, and it breaks it down in that structure. So it gives you an idea of truly how you can go about studying the Bible, because there's not really one way, but this way seems to work for me, and I think it works for Melanie too. So we're just very encouraged, and my goal is not to stop the plan, right? Not to stop the 100-day challenge. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be here every time I can. I'm going to try to put in extra work. So I kind of ask those that are here, because you guys are truly the core members of Summit. Let's just say it. I mean, that's just the truth. You guys come here religiously or faithfully every time that's required. And it's not because it's appointed or because you don't want to. It's because you want to be here, and you want to be with an encouraging family of believers. And that's really the key here. It's not about me talking about this message. It's about us as a family and trying to encourage and strengthen one another. And I'm just trying to provide an opportunity for you all for some additional study. If you want to do it, there's like $13 on Amazon for the book. And it's really, to me, it's going to be a helpful tool. And it's helped me get re-energized on understanding, the Bible. And then you try to figure out how it relates, right? Once you read it and plug it in, you try to figure out how it relates to the overall study of the Bible and how it's incorporated in there. So if you have a need of some sort, I mean, granted, I can't really do anything for you financially, but if you need physical help, and I apologize to Candace earlier because she had a need and I wasn't able to help there. And that's really what our goal is, right, is to help those in need and to try to lift each other up. And if we can do that, I feel that we'll have a better opportunity to make this church grow and to make Summit not really known for being a church on a hill, but just being a group of believers that are willing to help others in need. And I know Steve, I'm really proud of Steve because he went over there, and I think that's the only name or maybe it was Kyle. Was it Kyle that went over? It was Kyle that went over there. Yes, I was really proud of that, to see Kyle come over there and help Candace out, because that's really, that's the key. I mean, if we could humble ourselves to not worry about what others think about us in our lives and what we do in our jobs, we'll be better people in the long run. I mean, it's hard, right, because you have to be a certain way, and you don't know when you can speak to someone about Christ. And I just think that if you get better studied or better prepared, and maybe the World Bible School is the way to go too, because it helps you with the answers too. I may not have all the answers, and it'll take me a while to figure it out, but I'd be willing to do that. So as a song of invitation that we've got prepared for us today, we really call out to everybody here. Obviously, there's probably some of you that don't have a immediate need right now, but if there is a need or some point, if you haven't named Jesus, by burial and baptism, then you need to take the chance, right? You need to take the first step, because it's only a step, and we'll be here to support you. At least I'll try my best to support you, and I hope everybody else is feeling the same way. So let's please stand as we sing the invitation song.
When we walk with